I personally think that UK properties are 100% better than Singapore properties. Yeah, 100%. And it's not even joking. Another of my students was working so hard. He was in the bank, working so hard, he had a stroke at work. Right, and he said, Dan, I want to do this. I want to grow my portfolio over the next 2-3 years so that I can retire my wife. And now his wife is retired, by the way. The wealthy people in the world learn how to use money they have earned to invest in assets and buy back time.
So interestingly, we are in Singapore, one of the best, I would say, property markets out there. And you are telling me about UK property. Why not Singapore property? Hello listeners, today we are in Singapore again and we have one of the most prolific property investors. He has been involved with over 10 million Singapore dollars of property transactions, built a portfolio of over 80 property units with over 25 properties, and is the founder of Golden Goose Property, Daniel Sim. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Bob, and welcome to Singapore.
Again, yeah, this is our second time using this studio as well. So today we're going to talk about a very interesting topic, which is property. Of course, being in Singapore, property is one of the most valuable assets here in Singapore. Before I start, let's ask you as well, how do you get into property?
Many years back, when my wife and I first started working, we were always thinking firstly about how do I make my monies work harder for me. Because, in Singapore, Malaysia, as you know, right, everybody work very hard for money and we're so tired most of the time. I think quite early on, because my wife and I were doing quite well in our careers. She was in practicing law at that point and I was in the public service. So we were so used to working very long hours. Like every time OT, weekday nights, like 10, 11 o'clock was like the norm. And sometimes even on weekends, I will go back with her to the office and carry files. Yeah, boyfriend duties, then haven't married yet. But then, that really started to make me think, so many of us are trading our time, our energy for money. How do we make our monies work harder for us instead? Yeah. So that was something that really captivated me, even from a young age. Because, I wasn't born with a silver spoon. My dad actually drove a cab for many years to bring us up. And seeing how hard he worked, I think that really made me think there has to be a better way. Yeah. And even though I studied hard, I went to good schools, I got a scholarship, I felt somehow still quite stuck in a rut, a bit like a hamster on a wheel. And then I started to try many things before I even got into property. So I attended lots of courses on stock investing, forex, learning about tax liens in the US. What else did I do? I did a lot of things and just experimented and tried lots of courses to varying degrees of success. Some, one day I make like 2K in one day. Then I was super happy, like over the moon. Then other days, like in the same one day, I lose 5,000. Yeah, I remember there was this time I went on a honeymoon with my wife. We all went to the beach, everything, and I didn't look at my phone. When I came back, I lost more than, actually not even 5,000. I lost about 10K USD in options gone wrong. Yeah. So that's when I started to think, I really need something that's a bit more stable, a bit more predictable. And I don't want to keep monitoring the results on my phone. Equities or other asset classes can go up over time, or in a short period of time, but it can also come down very quickly. And I think we all experience seeing like 20-30% drop in values overnight. So that's how I started to learn more about property. But it doesn't really work so well in Singapore. But a little bit more on that later.
Yeah, was it someone or a book or something that inspired you to get into property?
Yeah, good question. I think, first of all, it was a book, right? I think reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki really opened my eyes to think the whole idea of how can you make your money work harder for you, right? But I kind of stopped there, then how to execute, right? We're all very curious. I buy into the idea, but how do I actually execute it? As I attended a lot of different courses, there was this time when I went to one of those big stage events at the Expo in Singapore, and Robert Kiyosaki was there. Yeah, that's the whole reason why I went. It's like, wow, this guy, I've learned so much from him, and he's in Singapore. I must go and see him. So I went there very hungry to learn. he shared his piece, and then he said this one statement. He said, if you guys want to learn to create more passive income, retire early, right, and have more time with your loved ones, then learn from this guy. Like, he pointed to somebody on stage. So I was like, okay, if Robert Kiyosaki asked me to learn from this guy, I'm going to learn from him, right? So that's where I learned from one of the speakers then, who was talking about UK property and the opportunities. But I was also a bit skeptical, right? As most people, we're like, okay, is it for real? Can it really be done? Because then it's like this Ang Mo guy teaching you, right? And then you don't know, like, can an Asian guy, can a Singaporean, Malaysian do the same? Can we replicate the same results? So after the whole event, right, I actually went up to that speaker, looked him in the eye, and I asked him, does this really work? And then his answer back to me was actually very honest. He said, if you are going to make it work, then it will work. And wow, actually there's a lot of truth in that. Yeah, and my wife looked at each other. We looked at each other, and the investment was quite a big investment. We invested more than 30,000+ Singapore dollars to ask this person to mentor us, to teach us the ropes. We flew to the UK for 3 days just to hit the ground running, meet teams there, understand the market. And I tell you, that's, most people think like, wow, siao, you invest 30,000 to do this. But it's one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life, because otherwise we wouldn't be here today, right? And I think there's a quote, right, that says insanity is doing the same things again and again and expecting a different result. And here my wife and I were every day working hard, OT, weekend, go shopping, year-end, go holiday. We are doing the same things as 95% of people, but here we are wanting to get out of the rat race, grow a property portfolio and retire earlier. Then we must be insane, right? So that's why we decided to we took really big action and in the direction that we wanted to create, and there's like no looking back. Like, we will do whatever it takes to achieve that goal. Did it take longer than we expected? Yeah, of course. We expected you're going to be, financially free in 1 year or 2 years' time. It's taken longer than that. But I also realized that the people always overestimate what you can achieve in 1 year, but underestimate what you can achieve in 10. And yeah, I think the predictable, to me, I always say I like my investments to be boring. Boring and predictable and safe. And I think that's better than a lot of people who, the investment's very exciting one, go up, go down, go up, go down. So with a boring investment, then you can do the exciting things in life. Yeah, like I have 3 kids and we love creating memories, like going on holidays together. But that is funded by my passive income and my investments, not from my bonuses or my salary. Because I spend already, then the cycle starts again, right? Then I need to work again in order to create more wealth.
Like people say, there's no pain, no gain, right? So there's nothing good comes easy as well. And it's very amazing that you share that you took that leap of faith, $30,000, right? And then flew to the UK. There's a lot of commitment there. What was going through your head? Is they like, this has to work, or I have to succeed? What was going through your mind?
Well, that's a really interesting one, because I think a lot of people, they look at me now, right? And they think, wow, so successful. You have your passive income, no need to work. Every day you do what? Just sip cocktails on a beach, right? But,
drink English tea, right? You're doing
English,
UK.
Yeah, English tea and eat scones. But, jokes aside, when I was on that flight, and many flights over the last 10 to 12 years, as I was, growing my property portfolio, flying to the UK, people don't see the behind the scenes. Right, landing at Heathrow Airport at 6 a.m. and my first appointment is at 9 a.m. And I go through the whole week, building relationships, meeting experts, finding out for myself, is it really true? Can I really buy a freehold terrace in the UK for less than £100,000? Can I really rent it out and has high rental demand, get 6 to 8% rental yields, or even more, 10 to 12% for if I rent it out by the room, like real or not? Right, I want to see for myself. And who are the experts that I can trust, such that when I come back to Singapore, it's still well managed there, because otherwise, like, it feels like it's so far away. people don't realize that I had to go through that process myself, right? Like, oh my gosh, is it real? Doesn't mean that I've invested 30,000 means it confirm will work, right? And I go back to the same advice my mentor gave to me. It will work if I make it work. Yeah. So when my wife and I flew over, actually we didn't have very much of a holiday. We were there, right, 100% focused on, finding out for ourselves, doing the due diligence, and I would say building relationships with people on the ground. That was a big key, yeah, which a lot of our students now get to enjoy because we've built up these power teams over the last 10, 12 years. They can plug into the system, people who want to refurbish properties or, find properties or manage properties. Yeah, they can do it easily. But because we have gone through a lot of hard work, and some of these people in the initial years were not great. Like one of our solicitors, as they call it in the UK, or lawyers, as we call it here, was very thorough. So bad that my wife, at the end of a long day of work, had to do the own conveyancing work and, do it ourselves. So we, as people say, you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find a prince, right? Yeah, so we had to go through that process. Not to say that, property investing is a bed of roses. There's its own set of obstacles. But as you say, no pain, no gain. And, I truly believe to every challenge or every obstacle, there's a solution. So I guess that's the mindset to your question of what was I thinking. And when we landed, right, a few months after that, they told us, sorry, cannot get landing in the UK. Whoa, we were like shocked, because then they said you're a foreign national. If you want to get landing, you can only buy properties in London, zone 1 and 2, or buy like a new built condo in Manchester city centre, for example. But those are the properties that are so overpriced. Like, we buy terrace houses for like 100K, right? Those small properties are like 300-400K for a 1 or 2 bed flat. Yeah, and these are properties that the foreigners buy, but it's not where the locals live. So I can get landing on those properties also no use because it's going to be negatively cash flowing. It doesn't fit our strategy, even though the developers always say, oh, if you buy, then it's going to go up in value. We're going to raise prices in the next phase, which sounds exciting. That's exactly how we made our first mistake, which maybe I'll share a bit more later. Yeah, but we were really laser focused. If we want to buy properties that cash flow, then how? But that was a huge problem because cannot get lending. Then we also just started working how to get started. But that was one of the big obstacles that we had to work through, such that even today, first-time buyers, even if you're 60 years old, 70 years old, you can still borrow up to 65 to 70% in the UK. And that's something that we're really very proud of.
All right. So for Singaporeans, a lot of Singaporeans know about the UK. What they know is the football teams. I also, as a football fan, I know the cities because of the football teams. Right? You have like Nottingham, you have like Liverpool, of course, you have Manchester. But we have never heard about the property before. So why UK property?
Yeah, why the UK? You're right. When I first went there, right, all the cities just sound like football club names to me. And it's funny because some people live in the UK, study in the UK, or work in the UK, but they never thought of buying or investing in the UK. I think a few reasons why the UK and not other places. It really comes back down to what your strategy is. So if your strategy is for passive income and you're starting out with a capital that is, first of all, in Singapore, we have to pay like 20+% ABSD, stamp duty. So if you buy a condo that's like 1.5 mil, right, your taxes is already few hundred, 200, 300, 400K, right? With that amount of in stamp duty alone, I can actually buy, if you think about one property I can even buy flats, freehold flats in Scotland for like 30 to 40K pounds. Just imagine how many Golden Goose properties I can buy just on what people pay in stamp duty alone, right? So that's one big reason why the UK. I think everything's in English. The law in Singapore is actually modeled after UK law. So that's another very important aspect because if we have contracts, agreements, how enforceable is that, right? A bit of a teaser, but my first property that I bought, which is negatively cash flowing, every month bleeding, losing money, is actually a property in Malaysia. But more on that later. But the jokes aside is that when I first got the contract, right, and you probably can relate to it, it was all in Bahasa. I don't understand a single word. And I'm trying to do my electricity, and water and all this. Everything is also in Bahasa. Was very, very difficult. So ease of business, I think, is one. And I think one third and most important point is in the UK, up to 40% of the population rents. It's a very big cultural shift. Like, sometimes people in Singapore, Malaysia think, wow, so good, the opportunity so cheap. Why don't the locals buy the properties themselves, right? But they don't realize that especially in Singapore, we have a lot of things going for us. First of all, we got subsidized housing in HDB. We got CPF that helps us force saving. I mean, in Malaysia, you have something similar, EPF, yeah. Then we can get housing loans. We can get university loans at 0% interest rates. Whereas and a lot of us stay until we are like in our 20s or 30s, sometimes with our parents, right? Whereas in the UK, a lot of westernized societies, 18 years old already leave home already, right? And they leave home, obviously you can't buy a property at 18, right? So they start to rent. And some of them rent for life. It's just their culture. So in a place where there are so many people looking to rent, it's a great place to be a landlord, right? Because the rental demand is going to be very high.
Yeah. So like they have lords, so you can at least be a landlord.
That's where the word lord comes from, or landlord comes from, right? Because in the past, I think in Scotland, lords basically mean you own the land and then you're able to control that and rent it out. But interestingly, today, like actually, one of my members of my team, or one of our colleagues, she recently just completed on a property in the UK, and she said, "I want to start small." She bought a property in Scotland, and I think it was about 60 to 70,000 Sing to buy the whole unit, including stamp duty, solicitor costs, and everything. And she's going to collect about 500 a month Sing profit from that, minus all the expenses. So we're all joking that say, yeah, you are now a landlord, right? But I think it's also about, and she has 2 young kids, so I think it really helps to pay for the bills, electricity, utilities, and kids' education and stuff like that.
And because we are talking about the UK, of course, UK is famous for recently the Brexit, and there's also a bit of political uncertainty. They have a lot of changes in leadership. So does that affect property?
Yeah, really good question. So we're actually living in very interesting times, right? Yeah. There's Brexit, there's COVID, there was the inflation at like 10+%.
Yeah.
Interest rates were like all-time high. And then there was the Liz Truss, maybe 1 or 2 years back, where there's a joke, right? The cabbage outlasted Liz Truss.
Yeah.
and then there's the new Labour government, and people are reading things like, oh, is it going to be more difficult for landlords? So I think we need to my view in this is a lot of news is sensationalized. Yeah, and when we read the news, we need to wear our investor's hat. Because every time news are meant to sell readership, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole point of it. So they can't tell you like, nothing very much has happened in the last year. Investing in property is still the same. So they're always looking for headlines and things like, the property market is going to crash 30% in COVID, or Brexit, if you have a hard Brexit, the property market is going to crash 40%. Well, for investors, we wish it happened, but it didn't because it's going to be a great buying opportunity. But the reality, and I think few people know this, so I'm really glad you asked this, right? That in the midst of Brexit and COVID, the property market actually rose 10 to 12% year on year, all whilst the news was saying it's going to crash 30-40%. Can you imagine that? Then for us and our students, we've been investing through that. We're like, that's a fantastic opportunity. And when it comes to things like inflationary environment, interest rates that are high, well, our strategy is actually pretty simple. You just need to find a golden goose property that even after factoring the high interest rate or whatever, still able to give you a profit and make you at least 6 to 8%. That is as simple as it gets. However, simple also doesn't mean it's easy, right? There's a lot more technical details to look into it, and if with the changes, like you say, in the government. Well, to me, the key thing to understand is there is a huge shortage of property in the UK for the last 20 years. Yeah, every year, the government is building maybe about 100 to 150,000 homes, but the need, because of people getting married, they need to have their own property, or migration, even with COVID, is about 300,000 a year. So a shortfall of about 100 to 150,000 over 20 years. That's a few million property. I mean, I don't have my calculator here. But, regardless of who is the new PM or who is the new government, it doesn't change the fundamentals of the market. Yeah, some people ask me, what about investing in places like Japan? You get a lot of abandoned homes. Well, to me, the fundamentals are so important because if it's a growing population, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love to go holiday in Japan, eat sushi and all this. But if my strategy is for passive income, I want to rent it out, then it has to be in a place with high rental demand. Yeah, and even with the Labour government, the new changes, they're looking to have a renters' rights bill, which yet to be passed in the parliament. But a lot of people misunderstand what it really is. Essentially, they are just stopping no-fault evictions. Yeah, and the reason for that is the rental market, same like in Singapore and Malaysia, in COVID, it went through the roof, right? Yeah. So people don't realize that. Some people ask me, hey, then in recession, how? What happened to all these properties? Thinking that it will be jalat lah.
Yeah.
But actually, the reality is in recession, people have less, let's say, husband and wife, right? One person get retrenched, and we see unemployment going up right now. Then the initial plans to buy a home stalled, right? But if they still need a property to live in, then they have to rent lah. Yeah. So rental demand actually goes up in times of recession. So with the rents all going up, and what the UK government was trying to stop is landlords just evicting the tenants, even though they didn't do anything wrong. They pay rent on time, they take care of the property. And the reason why they did that is because if they evict the current tenant, there's a long queue of other tenants who are willing to pay more. Yeah. So that's what they were trying to stop. But if the tenant is not paying rent, there's a breach in contract, there is still things that landlords can do to evict the tenant. So I think it's about understanding and working with experts who are investors so that for me, I continue to buy property every year, also because I want to be a practitioner, right? Hands-on on the ground, so I know exactly what is happening, and then we can better guide our students along the way.
Yeah, that's right. So interestingly, we are in Singapore, one of the best, I would say, property markets out there. And you're telling me about UK property. Why not Singapore property?
That's a common one. In fact, some of our students are like property agents in Singapore as well. So it's very funny because they're helping people own homes in Singapore, but they themselves are investing in the UK. And I was like, that's interesting, right? I think Singapore, my father, he bought a HDB in Singapore for $5,000. This way back when he was younger. Now HDBs in Singapore are like more than $1 million. So the first question I always ask is, do you think Singapore is going to grow the same rate of growth from like third world, when Singapore was third world, to first, right?
Yeah.
Probably not lah. In fact, I was in the public service, right? By design, the government doesn't like the market to grow very quickly because then the correction will be very big and a lot of people will get hurt by that. And hence, they have put in so many cooling measures, right?
That's right.
TD, SR, ABSD. So a lot of people I talk to, they say, wow, back in the day, right, when we can buy properties and don't need to pay 20% taxes or, and stuff like that. If only we bought more then. But that's the same thing with property lah. I mean, when is the best time to buy property? The answer is yesterday lah, or 10 years ago. But the next best time is now. And we live in such a globalized world. Buying a property in Singapore, first of all, if you have a few $100,000 to pay in stamp duties, then okay, by all means go ahead. But interestingly, a lot of people are still queuing up at show flats. And my friend who's a property agent, he sent me a picture. Then I joke with him. I say, "Hey bro, free How come people buy as if it's free?" And don't get me wrong, if it's for their own stay, the developers always say, right, if it's near MRT, near to good schools and all this, then it's pretty good. Well, if it's for your own stay and your daughter or your son is going to a school there, fine lah, But if you're looking to rent it out, the key reason why you shouldn't buy Singapore properties if you're looking for cash flow is that if you just look at the rent and the mortgage. You get a mortgage on a 1.5 million property, that's going to be at least 8,000 a month. Your rent you can get is maybe 4,000 or 5,000. So from the get-go, you asked me to be honest, right? They are making a loss of at least 3,000-4,000 every month. yes, I mean, hopefully the property price will go up. But we also have seen many projects where 10 years later, the property value is the same as when they entered it. So it's like you have to tahan making a loss of 3 to 4K every month in the hope that the price goes up in value. And to me, hope is not a good strategy, right? I rather buy a property where I make a profit from day one and also at the same time goes up in value, right? So to me, like if it doesn't even meet this, I call this a cash flow litmus test. If I want to buy property that gives me more passive income, so because I think for most Singaporean Malaysian, if you have 4,000 or 5,000 Sing dollar equivalent, actually you cover most of your basic expenses. Can retire already. And I saw your other podcast where your guests were talking about how many millions do you need to retire. Actually, that's a common misconception. People always think that you need millions and millions of dollars, and then maybe you take the millions and earn like 3-4% and you live off the income. The reality is, if you buy one property, one Golden Goose property, a terrace house that let's say needs about 100,000 and it generates 1K in passive income, you only need 4 or 5 of these to retire.
So Daniel, I look at your landing page for one of your webinars, and then you make a comparison of the yield between UK and Singapore properties as well. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, I think apart from the stamp duties which we spoke about earlier, and I also shared that if you buy a property in Singapore, it's going to be, you're making a loss every single month, right? In the hope of capital appreciation. So the scary thing is if you look at the yields in Singapore, right? The agents or developers will tell you, oh, it's pretty good. You can get 2 to 4% yields. But those are gross yields, right? In the UK, the way we calculate our yields is on net yields, meaning how much actual profit you're making divided by how much money you're putting in. So if you're looking at a net yield basis in Singapore, right, that's actually negative net yields. But I personally think that UK properties are 100% better than Singapore properties.
Wow.
Yeah, 100%. And it's not even joking. The reason is simply because in Singapore or Malaysia, maybe you can get 3 to 4% yields, right? But in the UK, you literally can get 6 to 8% yields conservatively, right? My students and I get that all the time. If it's not even 6%, we don't even look at the property, right? So that's how confident we are of that. And I always ask people, maybe I ask you about how many percent is, 6 to 8%, right? How much more is that from 3 to 4%?
Is 5% more?
Yeah, it sounds like it's 5% more, right? Because simple math, right? 8 minus 3% is like 5%. But the reality is actually 100% more. 100%. Let's say 3%, or people put money in fixed D. They think like in recent times, interest rates was quite high. I mean, it's coming down now, but 3% sounds good, right? But if you can make 6%, some people think, why invest in property? Only 3% more, right? Like, and I have to go and own the property, learn about UK. But 6% is not 3% more than 3%. It's 100% more, if you realize that. It's double, right? So I always then ask people, do you want your money to be working doubly as hard for you? Or do you want to work doubly as hard for your money? Right? So that's really, it's as simple as that.
Yeah. So going into the UK property as well. So your method is the Golden Goose property. So how do I find the Golden Goose in the UK? Is it in Manchester? Is it in Liverpool? How do I find it?
Yeah, that's a lot of people think that going to the UK to buy a property, we should look into city centres. I mean, as most Singaporean Malaysians think that, right? Canary Wharf in London. Until now, a lot of people think I'm investing in London. But London is one of the places in the UK that you shouldn't invest if you're looking for Golden Goose property. So that's a huge tip for you. Simply because we are wearing our Singaporean Malaysian lenses when we look at it. So a property in Canary Wharf, maybe 500,000-600,000 pounds, not even $1 million Singapore dollars. Then Singapore Malaysia investors that invest in Mont Kiara or in Singapore condos, they think, very cheap Canary Wharf is because they are using that comparison, but they don't realize that people in the UK don't buy those properties. It's what expats rent, right? And in times of economic uncertainty, expats are sent home, and then you get lots of voids. So what we buy, to answer your question of what kind of property should you be looking at, the tip that I always share with people is look at ordinary properties for ordinary people. So if you look at any marketplace, which are the types of properties that majority of people are living in or renting in? And in the UK, I would say 60 to 70% of people in the UK live in houses because they got so much land, right? No, very few people are really living in flats. I mean, in some areas they are, right? But majority, if for the same amount of money, if they can travel, say, take a bus or a train 15, 20, 30 minutes out, and they can have a garden, landed property, have a space for the kids to run around at the back or have a barbecue, they will much prefer that. And that was a huge mindset shift for me because when I went there so many years ago, right, I flew over with my wife, we were thinking, wow, city centre better, next to MRT, next to shopping centre.
Next to football stadium.
Next to football stadium, yeah. But that's the interesting thing, right? But the locals don't like to stay next to football stadiums.
Oh, yeah.
Just imagine what happens every weekend.
Yeah.
Right? The traffic and the noise and the litter that's everywhere. So I would say, actually it's the same in Singapore and Malaysia. Nobody likes to stay, next to the airport, next to the smack in the city centre. Right? If you go to Raffles Place in Singapore in the morning and you look at people coming out of the MRT, it's like, wow, bees out of a hive, right? And that gives you a clue that most Singaporeans don't stay there. They travel in for work.
Yeah.
And same in Malaysia, right? How many minutes do you think most people are comfortable traveling in Malaysia for work?
Yeah, half an hour.
Half an hour,
yeah.
right? And I think that gives you a huge clue where to look for Golden Goose properties and where can you find great value for the properties and where locals live, right? By if you look 30 to 40 minutes out, that's a fantastic place to be because that's where most locals live and work live and then they commute in for work. So a lot of people are looking into shiny brochures and they think, wow, there's a new development here. The government is building something new and exciting in the city centre. Then you go and buy next to it.
Yep.
But that's where you're overpaying, right? A huge premium. And it's going to probably take the next 5 or 10 years for surrounding properties to catch up with that price. So even if you're investing for capital appreciation, you're already paying such a huge premium. It's going to take maybe 10 years before it even catches up to what you have bought it for. Yeah.
So you have how many students today, and how many success stories can you share with us?
Yeah, I mean So this is the funny thing, right? Like I started, even though I've been investing for more than 12 years, I haven't really started teaching people until the recent, I would say, 3 years or so. Yeah. And for a few reasons, one is I'm actually someone that's quite private about money. Yeah. So it's actually quite a big leap of faith for me to come on a podcast like this to share about my experience. Maybe it's an Asian thing, like we don't go around telling people like, how many properties I have and stuff like that, right? Just quiet and just grow our portfolio. But I had one of my friends, close friends in JC, we went to a wedding dinner and sat next to me and he said, hey, Dan, you got a property. You invest in properties in the UK. I said, yes. He said he has a property that he bought, cannot rent out, cannot sell in the UK. Yeah. Can I take a look at it? And I said, sure. And one look at it, I saw, I knew why he cannot rent out, like a new built condo in a city centre, as we were just talking about. So that started to hit me quite hard because my mentor then asked me, how many more people do you want to see lose money in property before you start sharing with them what you know? And I thought to myself, that's really true. And so now I do share on masterclasses a few times a year. I know some other people do it like, every other week, every month also got a class, right? Yeah. But for me, I don't do it that way. I only do it 2 to 3 times a year because I have 3 kids, as I shared earlier. I want to be present with them. My wife always reminds me we didn't spend more than 10 years investing in property to work ourselves into another job. Right? Yeah. So, and in each intake, we actually limit the number of people we take in. The funny thing is a lot of people boast about, wow, I got how many people in our community, so many people and all that. Yeah. But for me, I personally believe that less is more. Yeah. I'm not shy to say that we limit the number of people we take in. In fact, they have to apply and tell us why we should consider working with them. Yeah. Because we just want to make sure we work with people of the right fit. If somebody, one of my events, somebody on a chat, just texted and said, this is my number. I have more than $1 million. Ask Daniel to contact me. We were quite shocked, Immediately I told the team, this guy is confirmed out, right? Because we want to work with people who, have the same vibe, right? Yeah. And we want to enjoy working with them. So I would say, to your question on success stories, those of students who really work closely with us and execute what we tell them, I would say more than 80 to 85% of them go on to buy a Golden Goose property in the UK in less than 6 to 12 months. So, what we provide is education, but not just education, but results.
Yeah.
Because, and we handhold them all the way through until they collect their first rental. Yeah, to me, that is life-changing. And the reason why we've designed it this way is a lot of people tell me, hey, Dan, actually with your track record, you can just go and set up a fund now. You can raise millions of dollars. But, I'm not so excited to help
Rich people.
Yeah, millionaires become billionaires, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of our students, some of them are, I'm just thinking of so many people. One of them was recovering from cancer.
Yep.
And she has 3 kids to put through uni, or 4 kids, I think. And she said, wow, I've saved up maybe about $500,000. But if I send them through uni, then no more already, spend finish already.
Yeah.
Then how? So a lot of our students, they are looking to either fund their kids' university education, or someone to send their kids to uni in UK, and they are thinking, wow, pay rent so wasted, right? Might as well buy a property in the UK, then my son or daughter can go and live in that property, at least don't waste so much money. But I always share with them that actually that's okay, but a better strategy is you should buy a property that gives you the most amount of passive income, and with the returns, you can your kid can study, can live anywhere, right? Because it's like you have the milk, but you don't necessarily need to own the cow, right? We've shifted from a ownership to a consumption economy, right? Like Spotify, we don't play our own CD anymore. We just stream the music. Yep. And I think that's the same idea. So she's now gone on to build her portfolio in a short time, I would say in 1 or 2 years, generating 5,000 passive income every month. And her kids are going, she's very cute. She said, thankfully, my son wanted to study overseas. Now he decided to study locally. So even better, they got more budget to go traveling with her husband. Her husband is retired. So, and once the first kid graduates, then the next kid can continue to use that same passive income, right? And when the kids are done with uni, then she can use that for her retirement fund, right? All at the same time, instead of the initial amount of capital she set aside for uni is dwindling down, right? And the end zero. Here she's invested in a Golden Goose property, which the value will grow over time. And eventually she can have both, fund her kids' education and have enough for retirement as well.
Yep. So that's very amazing indeed. So we need to get back to an earlier question, right? So we talk about so many UK Golden Goose properties. So we only know Golden Goose from, of course, the legends. So tell us, what is a Golden Goose property?
Oh yeah, back to basics, right? What is a Golden Goose? I think I differentiate Golden Goose versus what I call an alligator property.
Alligator, okay.
Yeah. So alligator properties are those that the rent cannot even cover the mortgage.
Oh.
So every month you are basically making a loss, and you need to top up either from your savings or your salary. And if you're unemployed, then jialat, right? So these are the ones that the banks will come after you, they will eat you up, which is why it's called an alligator. So Golden Goose, as we all remember from our days of childhood, simply the Golden Goose that lays the golden eggs.
Yep.
And you should never kill the Golden Goose, right? So you enjoy the golden eggs. With the golden eggs, you can use that to fund your lifestyle. And that's what I do for our family, and our students do as well. So one property that I bought, my daughter, she loves to sing, and she actually performed for Broadway when Broadway came to Singapore, The Sound of Music, right? But singing lessons are also expensive, right?
Yeah.
So I actually bought a property, and that's her singing fund. Every month it generates enough income, and then that pays for her singing. My son likes to play the drums, so another property funds his drums. I have another property that pays for my helper, who has been with us for eight years. And it's about stewarding and taking care of the people in our life, right? So having that passive income that's recurring. If you think about it, our expenses are also recurring, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Every month, next month also need to pay bills. But if you are working only in a job as our primary source of income, if we stop working, either we fall sick, or you decide to change your careers, or unemployed, next month the bills are still due, but the boss is not going to pay you anymore next month, right? So we need to kind of reverse that by finding a recurring source of income and multiple streams. And to me, every Golden Goose property that we buy gives us another stream of income that's a bit more secure. I mean, people are very worried about the economy, and what's going to happen. To me, it's about creating your own economy, which gives you a lot more security.
We learned about the Golden Goose property, but how do we get started?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. I think the easiest way is we do run free web classes from time to time. I mean, we're done for the year. We're oversubscribed for the next ones as well. But I mean, you keep a lookout. Go to our webpage, goldengooseproperty.com, right? And then you can sign up for our free web class, right? And I will personally be presenting live, sharing some 3 game changers that I've learned over the last 10 years. So many people have come for it and gotten so much value. And I also run a live Q&A at each of these sessions. So yeah, if you're just remotely thinking that you want to plan for your retirement, how to pay for your kids' university, or you're just thinking of how to escape the rat race, I would say come and attend one of these web classes. Maybe we'll post the link at the bottom
we'll
as
put
well.
it in the description.
And I'd love to see you there.
All right. Another question I would have is, you mentioned about the Golden Goose properties, but what are the financing options? Because it's a property in the UK as well.
Yeah. So financing in the UK, I think the key thing is knowing the right people and having a team of experts to help you around that. So a lot of people are often curious about, can I get lending? Should I buy through a UK company or buy in my own name? What about the taxes? So these are topics that I all cover in my free web class. But quick answer for you is, the key difference between financing in Singapore, Malaysia, and in the UK is here, the older you are, the less you can borrow. Because the banks also know that it's alligator property, right?
Yeah.
So they need your salary or how many more years you can work to pay their mortgages, because they're in the business of risk.
Yep.
In the UK, my oldest student is 76 years old and he can get lending and build his portfolio as well. Simply because lending in the UK is not dependent on your income or your salary. I mean, we have retirees, we have housewives that can get lending as well. But it's dependent on the property itself, whether the rent can more than cover the outgoing expenses and still make a profit. Then a thing on taxes and structuring, investing through a UK limited company is probably the most tax efficient way of doing it. And there are lots of ways where we can make it more tax efficient. Yeah, but I mean, we don't have time today to go into that. So maybe
check out the web
catch
class.
us on the free Golden Goose Property web class. Yeah.
You mentioned alligator properties. So can you tell us about some alligators you have seen?
Oh yeah, wow, this one very painful. I bought my 12 years ago. My wife and I were so excited. We went to a seminar, right, and then a room full of strangers. And I'm so glad you asked this question, because this is one of the biggest mistakes people make in property investing. That is going into joint ventures with strangers, and the person say, "Oh, you come together. You are quite young. You can get lending. You are older. You got more capital. Then you just do joint ventures." Had I known, I would have never done that, because my co-investors are now in their 70s. If anything happens to them, all the liability is on me. Plus, is negatively cash flowing every single month, and I mean, you probably will be surprised to know it's one of the properties in Penang, which, for years I couldn't rent out. I couldn't sell. Even if I want to sell at a profit, also cannot sell, right? The rent is, the mortgage I'm paying every month is 6,000 some RM. It's a 1.7 million property that I bought.
Wow.
Guess how much is the rent my tenants are paying me?
I would say in Penang, they are quite stingy, so maybe 1,000.
Yeah, it's about 1,500 ringgit, and they get 20th floor sea view, 3 bedrooms. So anybody with an alligator property, the truth is this, right? You are basically subsidizing your tenant to enjoy the very nice property. And if it's you, please come to the Golden Goose Property web class. Just one thing that we share with you will change the way you think about property. And also people that keep thinking that paying off their property over time, for having a fully paid up condo, for example, a lot of Asians do that, right? Quickly pay off my loan. You need to come to the web class, because just this one thing that I will share with you, how do you tweak and release a lot of the equity that's stuck there and is really lazy, you could be financially free very quickly. And a lot of our students have done that.
So Daniel, why are you so passionate about property?
I think that's when I think about property, and I think about all the students that we help, each property that they buy, to me, has a generational impact. Yeah, it literally changes their lives forever, because these are freehold properties. Some people say, what kind of property should I look at? If you look at a freehold property that is like 900 years at least, think how many generations that is. And one of my students is very cute. He said, wow, one day my great-great-great-grandchild is going to think, wow, great-great-grandpa was pretty good. He got himself educated, he bought some Golden Goose properties, and they're now enjoying the fruits of that. But I think beyond making money and all that, which is great, and leaving a legacy, it's really about time. And I mean, it's really cool that we have this hourglass here, because all of us think that we're going to live till we are 80 years old.
Yeah.
I have a very close friend who is struggling with cancer right now. And just a year and a half ago, he was so energetic. I spent time with him, and he didn't know that he had cancer then. The truth is, we never really know how much time we really have. And we try to, it's like the hourglass, right? We try to catch hold of time, but it slips through our fingers. So I think the biggest thing that building a property portfolio in a way that's safe, and yes, you generate more passive income and all that, but the biggest thing is it helps you to buy back time.
Yep.
Yeah. And I ask my students, okay, now that you have 4 or 5K more passive income, then what's next? Some of them will say, oh, then I buy more property lor. I said, buy more property for what? Then I got more money lor. More money for what? Then I can buy more property. But do you see that they have missed the point? Because ultimately, property is a vehicle, right? The key thing, and I mean for all the listeners here today as well, is to ask yourself, what is the destination? What is the end point, right? Like at the end of our lives, where we're on our deathbed, nobody says like, hey, show me how much money in my bank account, or show me my Lamborghini keys, right? But there are a few regrets. Research has shown that the things people regret are not spending enough time with their loved ones, not taking the chances or opportunities they had in life, and I think working too hard. That's another thing. I think a lot of people, Singapore Malaysians can relate to that, right? Singaporeans especially. So, another of my students was working so hard. He was in a bank, working so hard. He had a stroke at work, right? And he said, Dan, I want to do this. I want to grow my portfolio over the next 2-3 years so that I can retire my wife. And now his wife is retired, by the way. So the daughter plays tennis. So they have now moved, the wife and the daughter has moved to Australia to learn and turn pro in tennis. She's very young, by the way. I think she's like 11 or 12, but playing professionally. And he is then, as he builds, this is the thing, right? A lot of us have active income and very little passive income. But as your passive income grows, then the active income can slowly reduce. And that's what I did as well. When I was working initially in the military, then when I left to work in the Prime Minister's office, I took a pay cut. And everybody thought I was siao. Like, iron rice bowl, tie fan one, why you take a pay cut? But they didn't realize that I was growing my passive income over time. And then when I left to work part-time as a consultant, 3 days a week, a further pay cut. But people on the outside think it's mad, right? But actually I was growing my passive income such that eventually I could leave my full-time job. And I think that's a slow and steady way to do that, right? It's a stable way of doing that. But the biggest thing is it allows me to buy back time, to be with my 3 kids. I never miss a single performance of theirs. Just being there. Actually, the real important things in life don't cost a lot of money, right? Like my littlest boy, he loves to take the bus. So in the mornings, he'll say, Papa, can we take a bus? I say, sure. And then he will tell me he's very specific and he say, I want to take a double-decker bus. And he loves to go to the top and sit right in front. And I think that always reminds me that in the past, could I have done that? It doesn't cost a lot of money to take a bus in Singapore, right? But in the past, I just didn't have the time because I was rushing to work for a meeting, nor did I have the energy to do it. At the end of the day, I'm just so tired from a long day of work. So I think, having time is the biggest gift that we can have. You could be anybody in the world, you could be the president, but everybody only has 24 hours. So when a lot of people in the world trade their health, their time for money in exchange for a job, right? But the wealthy people in the world learn how to use money they have earned to invest in assets and buy back time.
Oh, that's amazing. So last question before we go. So I follow Daniel. We met on LinkedIn, and Daniel posts a lot of posts, sometimes videos as well. So Daniel, where can we find you?
Yeah, that's. I think you can find me on LinkedIn. You just search for Daniel Sim, and I'm Bob's. Shares lots of amazing content as well. We also have a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So
We'll put a link in the description.
Oh, that's great.
What's the name? What's the name of the channel?
Golden Goose Property UK.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll find a lot of different topics. I've watched a few as well. So Daniel, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much, Bob. Really enjoyed having that chat.
Thank you.